From ancient flamethrowers to death whistles and a giant iron hand capable of capsizing entire ships, let's travel through time to investigate the most incredible ancient weapons to have ever existed. Hwacha. Most people think of high-tech guns that can fire a wide range of new types of projectiles when they hear the word rocket launcher. But they aren't brand new, no matter how modern they look. It is thought that the first rocket weapons were made in China in the 11th century. As soon as their neighbors saw them, they copied them. And in 1409 CE, a Korean model called the Hwacha was launched. You might not have thought a 600-year-old tool would be very powerful, but it was. The Hwacha doesn't look very dangerous at first glance. It's a wooden cart with sticks sticking out of the top of a box, but they're not sticks. They're 100 arrows with explosives on them. The part that looks like a box isn't just a box either. It's a launch pad. There was a fuse on each gunpowder-filled paper tube, like a fireworks set, and they were all linked together to make one long fuse. When the main fuse was lit, all 100 arrows would fire at about the same time, instead of having a separate fuse for each one. Just picture being on the battlefield, and all of a sudden, a wave of arrows that are pushed by explosives starts falling all around you. It's also not possible to run away from the fight because those explosive launchers were thought to have a range of about 1,650 feet. To give you an idea, that's about 38% farther than the range of shooters who used bows and arrows in the Middle Ages at the same time. Chinese fire lance. If you had to guess, when do you think the first guns were made? They don't feel very old, so maybe the 18th century? To everyone's surprise, the first gunpowder-powered weapon was made in 950 CE, which is in the 10th century. In those days, it was called a fire lance. It was made in China during the famous Jinsong Wars. With dynamite and a slow match strapped to the front of the spear-like polearm, it was ready to use. The gunpowder tube would send a stream of flames toward the target once the fuse was lit. Exactly, an old flamethrower. Over the years, gunpowder has changed and gotten better, and so has the fire sword. In one form, pellets were put inside the bamboo tube and shot out like bullets, making it look like an old flamethrower shotgun. By the 1300s, fire lances no longer had a lance point. Instead, they relied only on the gunpowder blast. The weapon got so strong that the bullets it fired were harmful enough to kill people on their own. But there were some major problems, no matter how awesome it sounds. The guns were only made to fire 1 or 2 shots at most. For another thing, the gun had a range of only 10 feet, so you had to get really close to your enemy to kill them. Even though these things were stopping people, word quickly spread about the new tool. By the end of the 1400s, the destructive weapons were not only wreaking havoc in Eastern Asia, but also in the Middle East and Europe. It looks like a lot of fun was had by everyone. Warwolf. People are scared of the name Warwolf, even if they are very tough. But what kind of weapon could have that name? Did people put real wolves on horses and ride them to the front lines? Too bad, no. The machine is similar to a trebuchet, which was used in the Middle Ages to attack enemy strongholds with big stones or other projectiles. The beast, which is a scary 60 feet tall, is thought to be the biggest trebuchet design ever made real. A huge counterweight is raised and held in place by a trigger device, which is how the mega machine works. When the trigger is let go, the balance falls and the sling whips up, sending rocks or hot objects hundreds of feet into the air. The Warwolf was made when England and Scotland were at war in the 1400s. Stirling Castle, with its thick walls and high position, was the last refuge in Scotland to stand against English rule in 1304. The English blocked off Stirling Castle for 4 months, hitting it with lead balls over and over again, but it wouldn't fall. That's why King Edward I of England called in the Warwolf. It took 5 builders and 49 other workers 3 months to build the huge trebuchet. It was worth it, though. The Scottish rebels gave up when the Warwolf was ready. Just seeing it was enough to make them give up, but Edward didn't pay attention. Why make a toy if you're not going to play with it? Estimates made today say that the huge trebuchet threw 300-pound rocks over 650 feet at 120 miles per hour. You already know what the Warwolf did to Stirling Castle. Yes, the curtain wall of the defences was totally torn down. Bagnak. The Bagnak, also called the tiger claw, is a small, 2-inch-long tool from India that was used for cutting in the 17th century. With the 2 rings on either side of this sharp scratcher, the user could put it on their finger and make it look like a claw. For those who don't like the long blades, you could also carry around smaller bagnaks in your hands until it was time to kill an enemy who wasn't expecting it. If biting your opponent like a tiger wasn't scary enough, some scary people poisoned their claws. This meant that their enemy would not only have deep cuts, but also poison in their blood. The Bagnak could be changed so that it had a blade built into the side, in case stabbing your enemies to death wasn't enough. The Ironclaw of Archimedes. The Ironclaw of Archimedes has both small and large claws. There is a story that this old tool was actually some kind of claw. Even though it had that name, it wasn't used to scratch enemies really hard. During the siege of Syracuse in 214 BCE, Roman ships attacked the city that is now Sicily. That's when they came up with the idea for the huge claw machine. The arcade-style weapon was made by the Greek inventor Archimedes to protect the seawalls of the old city from ships. History books say that the claw of Archimedes hung over the wall like a crane and had some kind of gripping hook on the end. To move the chain that the hook was attached to, a pulley and beam device was used. So when an enemy ship came up to the seawall of Syracuse, the claw would be dropped and hit the ship. The pulley system would be used by people or horses to raise the hook, which would then lift the ship. After being raised, the ship would be let go all of a sudden, crashing back into the water and damaging the ship. People wrote about how the hook would flip ships over and cause a lot of misunderstanding, even if the ship wasn't completely destroyed. Even though there were no measurements given, huge models of the claw have been made based on the few details that were given to see how plausible it is. Many of these models were able to lift a ship out of the water. It might not show that a claw that strong ever existed, but it could have. The Hellburners. Hellburner ships were one of the most deadly weapons ever made, even though they sound like the newest punk rock band. These ships were not like most, as their name suggests. They were fire ships, which are ships that were filled with explosives, set on fire on purpose, and guided into an enemy fleet. In 1585, Spanish ships were going around Antwerp, which was then a Dutch city. The Dutch wanted to save the city, so they asked Federico Giambelli, an Italian battle engineer, to come up with a way to stop a nuclear explosion in the 1600s. Giambelli built rooms inside of 2 ships. He put 7,000 pounds of gunpowder in each room. Then, rocks, hooks, and metal were put around the chambers to make the blast even more deadly. A slow-burning fuse was supposed to set off the blast on the first ship, which was called Fortune. The Fortune, on the other hand, floated away from the Spanish ships, and its explosion didn't do much damage. But there was still hope, because the second ship, which was named Hope, was on its way. The Hope didn't have a delayed fuse. Instead, it had a time bomb, which was a complex mix of gunpowder and gears that would set off the fuse at a certain time. On this occasion, the ship floated right into the path of the Spanish ships and was able to go boom. People said they could hear the blast from 50 miles away. It's no surprise that the bomb's blast and the falling debris did a lot of damage and killed about 1,000 Spanish soldiers. In fact, the explosion was so big that scholars think it was the biggest explosion ever made by humans at that time. When you have Hellburners, who needs nukes? Greek fire secret weapon. Almost 1,000 years before the Hellburners set sail, another old weapon was causing trouble on the high seas. This time, though, it wasn't a ship that did it. It was a clever weapon that was brought on board. Constantinople, which used to be the capital of the Byzantine Empire, was under attack from 674 to 678 CE. An Arab fleet of ships set up camps along the coast, blocked the city, and attacked Constantinople's defences at the same time. In order to protect his city, Callinicus of Heliopolis came up with a tool that was so powerful that it changed the course of the war. The ancient flamethrower, which was called Greek fire, threw a burning mixture at Arab ships from tubes on the bows of Byzantine ships. The flames came from siphons that were under pressure, which gave them better range and accuracy, so that the dangerous mix could reach the enemy ships. When the fire reached the Arab fleet, it destroyed the ships, and men had to get out of the wreckage quickly or be burned to death. But having what's basically a flamethrower at sea isn't ideal because of the water. It was said that Greek fire was so powerful that it could even burn on water. The weapon was so powerful that it destroyed the Arab ships and ended the 4-year siege. We still don't know what could make such a risky liquid because the secret recipe has been lost for a long time, and we can only guess what the ingredients are. Naphtha, a liquid that can catch fire, is thought to be the main ingredient. This most likely had potassium nitrate mixed in with it. Lastly, a sprinkle of sulfur, which made a loud noise and a cloud of smoke when it was added. Do not try to make Greek fire at home, please. Mwahut. Spanish writings from the 1600s say that the Aztecs killed and sacrificed people in the most horrible ways for the sake of their gods, like sacrificing their hearts while they were still beating before throwing their bodies down the hundreds of steps of the huge Templo Mayor. But if you thought that was scary, the Mwahut, an Aztec sword, is even scarier. No one knows for sure when the wooden paddle first appeared, but by the time the Spanish conquistadors came to Mexico in the 1600s, many Aztec fighters were using them. That the Mwahut is known for being cruel doesn't come from the paddle itself, but from the obsidian blades that line the sides. This glass from a volcano is very sharp. Its cutting edge is 500 times stronger than the sharpest steel blade. It is so exact and sharp that it is even used in some scalpel blades. The Aztecs didn't use obsidian to make exact cuts, though. Instead, they wanted to cut off the heads of their enemies. It's not a surprise that the Mwahut was pretty good at that. According to reports from Spain, they were able to cut off the heads of both men and horses. When cutting off their enemies' heads wasn't required, Aztec warriors would use the obsidian blades to make many shallow cuts on their victims. Then, they would hit them over the head with the paddle to knock them out and drag them back to be sacrificed. Aztec death whistles. It looks like the Aztecs liked making people suffer because their crazy weapons didn't end at the Mwahut. An amazing find was made by archaeologists in Tlatelolco, Mexico City in 1999. It looked like toy whistles were in the hands of a skeleton. However, they were not toys, but something much worse. It was found later that the victim had death whistles in their hands. The very small instruments were a big part of Aztec ceremonies and were thought to help guide the dead through the future. But some historians think these tools may have been used for something even scarier. When the Aztec death whistle is blown, it makes a scream. Some people think that the Aztecs used the whistles as a way to attack people's minds. In the 1600s, when the Spanish conquistadors fought the Aztecs, they said that the Aztec fighters played drums, shells, and other instruments during battle. It is said that the sound of hundreds of insane screams would have been a way for the Aztecs to confuse and scare off any enemies they were up against. Urumi. A sword is usually a tool with a sharp, rigid blade, but some old swords don't follow those rules. The Urumi came from India. It looks more like a dog leash than a sword. Others think the sword is from the Sangam period, which was about 1,800 years ago. No one knows for sure when it was first used. The Urumi's steel blade has a flexible edge that lets its user use it like a whip instead of a sword. However, It's not always just one cutting blade that does the harm. Far from it. Sri Lankan Urumis can have up to 32 blades, and each one can be up to 5 feet long. Because the tool has sharp edges, it can cut or trip up an enemy. Plus, the Urumi's blades can bend so they can whip around an enemy's shield. This thing can hurt anyone. It's not even the user. Fighters who haven't trained are just as likely to hurt themselves as they are to kill an enemy if they don't know how to whip well. However, there's something even more badass about the weapon than how it sounds. Some Urumi patterns can even be worn around the waist like a belt when you're done swinging and slashing them. The Lantern Shield. People say that the Italian Renaissance was a time of discovery, and that works by Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo changed the way people lived in Western Europe. But there's one clever thing that beats even the best works of art. It's called the Lantern Shield, and it's a shield with a lamp on it. This strange tool is thought to have come from Italy in the 15th century, but no one knows for sure. The shield was just under 1 foot across, so it wasn't that big. It wasn't very big, but it made up for it in style. A glove with 2 spikes sticking out of it was attached to the shield. It got even thornier when a long, straight sword blade was put on under the protective glove. But the most crazy thing about the shield wasn't its complicated shape or sharp edges. When troops raised their shields, they could put a lantern behind them and use a lever to open a small hole in the shield that let the lantern's light shine through. Putting a lantern with a flame on top of your shield doesn't seem like the best idea, no pun meant. The strange weapon wasn't used in normal battles, though. The lamp shield was used instead in battles at night. At night, Italian police used their super shields to search the city streets for thieves. At first, having a light coming out of your shield might not seem like a good idea. After all, it will let enemies know where you are. But that's what makes the tool beautiful. When someone gets closer to the shield, the light gets brighter, making it harder for them to see, giving the person who has it time to hit their opponent and kill them. The Man-Catcher. Early in the war, the Italians used lamp shields to blind each other. Soon after, another amazing weapon appeared in Europe. It's called the Man-Catcher, and it looks like the love child of a trash picker and a pinball machine. It was probably used in Europe in the late 1700s. The tool was made to kill people. It was made up of a stick with a head that had 2 prongs on it. The spikes could be opened up so that they could fit around the necks of most targets. When they were done, they locked back into place. And to make things even worse, some versions of this tool had spikes that faced inward, so if you got caught, you couldn't fight back. During war, the evil tool was used to grab men by their horses and drag them to the ground. It might not look like the best way to kill your enemy, but that wasn't always the point. If an enemy knight was caught living, they could be used as ransom. This made the Man-Catcher the perfect tool for getting someone valuable. Most people think that this strange machine is only found in history books, but the Man-Catcher is still used today. The Japanese cops use a changed version of the Man-Catcher in the 21st century. The metal nails have been replaced with padding and blunt ends, which is a good thing. Chakra. If you watched Xena, Warrior Princess, you'll know that the steel discs are one of her main tools. The scary ball wasn't just made up for a TV show, though. The Chakra may not always look like the TV weapons with the split blades, but don't underestimate the damage these discs can do. While no one knows for sure where it came from, we do know that the Sikh troops used the circular bladed weapon as early as the 16th century. They were usually between 5 and 10 inches across and had a flat, efficient shape that let them be thrown 200 feet. Many people who use the tool learn a way to throw it called tajani. First, the weapon is spun around on the middle finger. Then, it is thrown with a flick of the wrist. Both speed and distance are added to the throw by the spinning and quick flick. People who use the tool can also keep from cutting themselves by running their finger along the blunter inner ring. It's probably a good idea to do that because history records say that the discs can cut off whole limbs when used correctly. The chakram has a very sharp circle blade that moves very quickly. This makes the weapon keep spinning even as it goes through something. Siege of Kafa. The Mongols laid siege to the city of Kafa in 1343. The siege went on for 3 long years, but by 1346, the Mongol army was running out of options and was battling to cross. Even worse, the bubonic plague, also known as the Black Death, was spreading and killing people. Infected fleas that were moving on rodents spread the bubonic plague, which killed many people. People who were bitten got high fevers, muscle cramps, and buboes, which are big boils that formed in a circle around their armpits and groins. The only good thing about it is that the pain didn't last long. Most of the people who got sick died in less than 8 days. Even though the Black Death was terrible, Jani Beg, the master of the Mongols, refused to give up the siege. He instead thought of a terrible plan. The Mongols didn't throw away the infected bodies. Instead, they connected them to cannonballs and threw them over the walls of Kafa. It was the best biological weapons of the 1400s. So now the people of Kafa not only had to deal with having their city circled, but also with dead bodies that were infected falling on them. The people of Kafa tried to get rid of the bodies, but the city quickly caught the disease. Even though Jani Beg's plan to shut down Kafa did work, the evil weapon had one effect that wasn't planned. Those who made it through the experience went sailing to Western Europe, where they brought the plague with them by accident. And that was the end of the Black Death, which killed around 50 million people across Europe. Odachi. One of the most famous weapons in history has been the sword. Because they come in different sizes and shapes, they are great for carrying around and quickly pulling out if something goes wrong. However, there is one old blade that doesn't follow these rules. In Japan in the 1400s, the Odachi was the best type of sword. The normal Odachi was 3 shaku tall, which is about 36 inches. At that time, most longswords were about the same length, so these blades were pretty long. But Odachi didn't end at 3 shaku. 5 shaku blades were twice as big as most swords. They were about 60 inches long. In fact, it was too long to draw from a belt sheath. Either the person who held it carried it on their back or had someone carry it for them. As people started to use guns instead of swords, the Odachi lost popularity because it was hard to draw and heavy. That doesn't mean it went away totally, though. The Odachi Norimitsu was made in the 15th century. This was a 12 shaku sword, which means it was over 12 feet long, 15 feet plus 148 inches. But as cool as it sounds, it's more likely that this sword was made to look cool than to fight Japanese giants. You may think that is a big blade, but the Haja no Ontachi is 100 times bigger. There is no way this Odachi sword, which is thought to have been made around the 18th century, could be more than 15 feet long. Just to give you an idea, the Haja no Ontachi is about the height of a female giraffe if you hold it straight up. The weapon also weighs more than 165 pounds. The beast was called the Great Evil Crushing Blade for a reason. The good news is that the Haja no Ontachi was only made as a religious ritual item. We hope you liked this video. Watch another video here.